as this is our final, can you believe this? Our final scheduled meeting of President Obama's Export Council. I want to remind everyone that our time today is short. We've scheduled this for an hour. We want to conduct all of our business so that we can ask everyone to keep, so I can ask everyone to keep their remarks brief. I will set an example by simply noting that today the council will consider and vote on 2 letters that we will present to the president. I'll defer the remainder of my remarks to our discussion on those 2 letters a little bit later. Next, I want to let everyone know that our vice chair, Arnie, is unable to join us today. I'm grateful to Arnie for stepping in and for his staff for all of their hard work in helping us to prepare for this meeting and for some of the other engagements that we've had so far. Arnie ordered me to read the following note in his absence. So this is his letter to all of you. So, dear Secretary Pritzker and fellow PEC members, I am sorry I am not able to join you today for our final PEC meeting, but wanted to extend my sincere thanks to all of you for this tremendous experience of serving on the PEC as the vice chair. I'm so impressed and pleased with how responsive the administration has been to the reviews of the PEC, and one of the letters today reflects the great progress that has been made and the recommendations that have been acted upon. Secretary Pritzker, thank you for your tenacity and leadership. She'll get an actual copy of the letter, so. And leadership. More remains to be done, and getting TPP passed and XM Bank reauthorized remain priorities for the American business community. So we're committed to supporting the administration's efforts. And to Ursula Burns and the other PEC members, thank you for your partnership. I'm really proud of what we've accomplished together. Warmly from Asia, Arnie. I want to join Arnie in thanking the President for the privilege of his appointment to serve on this council. I know that my colleagues want to express their gratitude as well. Welcome, Secretary. And we are reserving some time at the end of our meeting for those kinds of acknowledgments. Now I'd like to recognize the elected officials who will attend the meeting today, who are attending the meeting today. First, I'd like to recognize David Reichert of Washington, who's joining us today. Is David here? I didn't see him.
Yeah.
Ah, Sheriff. Yeah, coming in. You stuck in there.
We had a cab malfunction. So
I want to give you a special shout out because you have been the attendance guru here. I think you've missed only 1 meeting in all the times that we've been here.
yeah, I was on an airplane. Sorry.
Thank you.
But thank you, Ursula, and thank all of you for your hard work, and appreciate the opportunity to say a few words at this last meeting. I've really enjoyed the opportunity to interact with everyone in the room. It's been a great experience having the President stop in and getting a chance to personally ask him questions, and members of the Cabinet. It's not something that usually members of Congress have the opportunity to do, so I was really proud and pleased when Speaker Boehner assigned me this position. And now as the Trade Subcommittee Chair and working closely with the Ambassador and his team, we have been beating our heads against the wall right now, trying to find a pathway forward for TPP. I have every confidence that we're going to find that pathway forward. Some people have said it's dead. I don't believe it. I know that the Ambassador doesn't believe it, and the President doesn't believe it. And all of you in this room know the hard work that you have ahead, and again, just appreciation for everything that you've done. But remember too the things that we've actually accomplished during our time together, and I can't believe it's almost been 6 years, and none of you have changed a bit. You all look the same to me. And I'm sure you'd say the same about me. Maybe not. But reauthorization of XM Bank, and I know that my colleague Susan Del Bene will comment on that a little bit further. Expansion of the information technology agreement, the passage of the free trade agreements with Korea, Colombia, and Panama. I was fully engaged in that and excited about the progress that we made there, and it's really been a benefit to Washington State, where we both come from. Korea has just really, just in some agricultural products alone, our exports to Korea have more than doubled. So we're excited in Washington State for the opportunity for TPP. And also, in order for us to move forward on TPP, recognizing the accomplishment of getting TPA passed, which was no easy task either. So we recognize there's still some work to do in EXIM Bank. It's got to be fully functional, but I think we're all working on that. And actually, I'm going to be sort of sad to not be a part of this group again. But again, thank you for your kind words, Ursula, and thank you all for your hard work, and I appreciate the opportunity to just comment.
Thank you. I'll call out the names and then have some other people talking, and as we'll come back and loop around to everyone later. But thank you, Representative. Thank you, Mike. Next, Suzanne Delbeni of Washington. She's also joining us. Thank you. We'll have you. I'll come back around to you. Mayor Buckhorn of Tampa. Is Mayor here? Yeah. How are you? Good to have you here. He's representing the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And Amy Klobuchar will be here a little bit later. We'll recognize her when she comes in. Thank you for all being here. And a number of the President's top advisors are also with us, and I'd like to welcome, first and foremost, the leader of the Department of Commerce, Penny Pritzker. Thank you for being here. She's become a pretty good friend.
Yeah, definitely.
Trade Rep Ambassador Mike Froman, also great worker and a great friend. Valerie Jarrett, the Senior Advisor to the President. Jeff Zients, the Director of the National Economic Council. Chris Liu, the Deputy Secretary of Labor. Elizabeth Sherwood Randall, the Deputy Secretary of Energy. Wanda Felton, the Vice Chair and First Vice President of the EXIM Bank of the United States. Lee Zack, the Director of the Trade and Development Agency. I saw her walking in. Eddie Hartley. Elizabeth Littlefield, the President and the CEO of the Overseas Private Investment Corporation. Our thanks to all of you and to the other administration officials around the table for being with us today. Now I'd like to call on Valerie for some opening remarks.
Thanks, Ursula, and good morning, everyone. On behalf of the President, I want to welcome you to our final, sadly final, PEC meeting. Having had the opportunity to attend these meetings since day one, I can say to you that it is extraordinary that we've been able to assemble a group of folks from all over the country, state and local elected officials, members of commerce, small, medium, and large businesses, people from both sides of the aisle, all with the single goal of trying to help us move our economy forward and open up markets outside of the United States to hardworking Americans. And the President, who regrets he couldn't be here, asked me to thank you for your service. Each and every one of you is busy, and the fact that you've made time to participate and help us in a whole array of issues that grow our economy is a testament to what's great about America. And so on his behalf, I truly thank you for that. I hasten to add, and I'm glad, Congressman, you brought up TPP, because even though, as the President says, we are in the fourth quarter, really important things happen in the final seconds before the clock runs out. And he is intent on making the absolute best of his remaining time in office, and at the top of his agenda, which we know is so important to each and every one of you and on whom each of you have worked for so long, is of course TPP. And he will continue to do everything from slow jamming the news on Jimmy Fallon to discussing this at a press conference in Singapore and bringing it up every chance he gets. And we'll be having meetings in the coming days with a broader group of leaders to, again, emphasize the importance of this to our country. And we can't thank you enough for the ways in which you have all helped push this forward. It's going to be a tough uphill climb, but you know what? We're used to tough uphill climbs. And we are determined to still try to get it done during his time in office. So I thank you for that. Lots happened in 7.5 years, and you guys have been there for the last 7 with us each and every step of the way. And I think the news that we heard yesterday in the state of the economy is a testament, again, to your hard work, both advising the President, but also those of you who are leaders around the country, what you've done each and every day to grow the economy. And Jeff's going to go into a little bit more detail on that now. So again, I'll start the way I began, which is just to say thank you. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Valerie. Now I'll call on Jeff Sines.
Thank you, Ursula, and thank you, Valerie. Just as Valerie said, a couple of minutes on the economy. 15 million jobs since 2010. The unemployment rate had gotten as high as 10%. We're now below 5%. Wages stagnation of wages is a problem that actually predated the Great Recession. And we certainly have more work to do, but yesterday we actually got some very good news. Median income last year rose 5.2%. That's the biggest increase on record. And it was also across the board, across different income categories, with the bottom 10 percentile actually increasing the most. Poverty.
Say that again.
Median income rose 5.2%, the biggest increase on record. Poverty shrank by 3.5 million people. Still work to be done there, obviously still, but that's the largest decrease since 1968. And on the healthcare front, we're down to 9.1% of people don't have health insurance, given that 20 million more people do have health insurance thanks to the Affordable Care Act. Exports have been important, central to the wage story, and that, as we all know, companies that export tend on average to pay about 18% more, so the work of PEC to increase exports has been central to the progress we're making. I will say on TPP, given this is the President's top priority, not surprisingly, his whole team, his cabinet, his team here at the White House is focused on doing everything we can to make the case. The senior administration officials and cabinet officials have done over a couple hundred events this year alone out in the field, which is the most important place to be. And we are all confident we'll have an opportunity, as the Congressman said, to find this path forward. XM, it's frustrating that we are where we are, but we've got to get a quorum and get XM back up to full strength. And we think the CR is the next opportunity to finally get that done. So we're fully committed to that. I'll close on something that I've talked to many of you about before, which is what I have found across my time in government. I was private sector for 20 years before that, is that execution is what really matters. It separates okay businesses from great businesses, and I think it matters even more in government because it's hard to get things done. And this group has been central to pointing us in the right direction, where we have opportunities, where we're messing up, and has been helpful in getting us across the finish line with real results. So this is, in my mind, a best practice for how the public sector and private sector can work together to make things better. So I just want to thank you for helping us execute. Much work still to be done, TPP and XM. There's work that we didn't get to that hopefully the next administration gets to, in terms of infrastructure and investing in infrastructure and business tax reform, just to name two that matter to exports. But I think a lot has gotten done, and you've been central to it, so thank you.
Yeah, the numbers look great. As you said, results matter. Still some work to do.
Yes,
Thank you very much, Jeff. Next, I'd like to hear from Secretary Pritchett.
Thank you, Ursula. First of all, Ursula, I want to thank you for your terrific leadership as chair of the President's Export Council. You've just done a terrific job, and you've been really committed, a valued advisor, and I really appreciate the friendship that we've developed as we have gone to Cuba together, as we've gone to Turkey, as we've gone to Poland. And for those of you who came with us to Turkey and Poland, that was an important trip, and you all really helped us out. And I can't thank each and every one of you enough for the wise advice that you've given us at the Department of Commerce and throughout the administration. As Jeff said, you really have pointed us in the right direction, but you've also held our feet to the fire in terms of making sure that we all execute along many lines, whether it's the national export strategy or so many of the different initiatives that you've helped us undertake that have really resulted in the kind of numbers that Jeff just delineated for all of us. You know, your advice has come to us in the form of 60, a staggering number, 60 letters of recommendation you have given us. You've met 14 times, And your work has guided us in so many different ways. You know, Trade Promotion Authority, you were right there with us. Trade Adjustment Assistance, you were right there with us. Frankly, guiding us to create a much more transparent and efficient export control system has been an enormously important part of the work that you've helped us with. You know, reaching back to the earlier days before my time, you helped with the implementation of Korea, Colombia, and the Panama trade agreements, as well as, frankly, not only the original national export strategy, but now the one that we will release later this year. And so I just can't thank you enough for the time, the energy, the wisdom that you've shared with all of us. It would not be possible for us to, I think, execute on so many different things, as well as, frankly, have the wisdom to know precisely where to focus our energy without your input. As Valerie and Jeff and others have said, we're not done. We are laser focused on getting TPP finished and across the finish line. We're working hard with many of you and your businesses to make the case for TPP, and not just the economic case, but the geopolitical and national security case. And we really appreciate all of your efforts at this very important endeavor to level the playing field for American businesses around the world. And your leadership is absolutely critical, so please stay in the game with us through the end. We need all of us to stay shoulder to shoulder on this. As the congressman said, don't believe everything you read in the newspaper. There's a lot of action going on here, and obviously one of my partners in crime, Ambassador Froman, will talk more about that. I wanted to just take a minute of your time to address an issue that's a top priority for the administration that's a little bit off topic, but I want to make you aware of the upcoming privatization of the international domain name system. I know it's not per se on our agenda, but for 18 years, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, an organization that we know as ICANN, has managed the domain name system with great success and with very little oversight from the Department of Commerce. And under that multi-stakeholder approach, Internet stakeholders have driven domain name system standards and policies, and the Internet has flourished. All of you know that. Your businesses depend upon it. But in recent years, Russia, China, and other nations that censor content and limit free expression have voiced their support for putting these functions at the United Nations and basically making the United Nations in charge of the Internet. And we cannot let this happen. So shifting control to the UN or any intergovernmental body would really make the Internet vulnerable to geopolitical disputes and endless bureaucratic delays. It will chill innovation and make it harder for our exporters to reach their customers, which are now all over the world, and frankly, for all of you to do business online. So it's not just bad policy, this is very bad for business and bad for our economy. So in 2014, the Obama administration tasked stakeholders with creating a plan to transition our stewardship at the Department of Commerce to strengthen the multi-stakeholder governance of ICANN, to protect the stability and security of the domain name system and maintain the openness of the Internet. And the transition should begin October 1. And there's an effort right now to derail that transition, and any effort by Congress to derail the privatization of the domain name system is going to embolden those who are seeking greater government control of the Internet. And I don't mean our government, I mean governments around the world. And so I wanted to make you aware of this very important issue and our call to U.S. industry to speak out in support of this transition, which is meant to happen in the coming weeks, because there are those who are trying to fight against what is necessary to be done to keep the Internet free and open. And so please, your voices could make a difference. So thank you for letting me intervene on that. And I'll just close by saying the following. You've left an immeasurable impact over the last 6 years. Your service is extraordinarily valued. You've made our country more competitive. You've helped expand exports for American businesses. And for the last 3 years, you've been an invaluable advisor to me and my team as we serve as your voice in policymaking and around the world. So on behalf of President Obama and our entire administration, I just want to thank you. Thank you for your service, for your role in guiding our country's economic policy, and for keeping America open for business. So thank you.
Thank you, Penny. I'm going to ask that other representatives from the executive branch defer their comments to later. Now I'd like to recognize the elected officials. We've already heard from Chairman Reichert, so thank you very much for that. Now I'd like to have Representative Del Bene speak.
Thank you, Ursula. It's great to be here today in the last meeting of the PEC of this administration, and I want to thank the private and the public sector members for all the work that folks have done over the years. In particular, the subcommittee on workforce readiness and the work that they have done to make sure that we have access to opportunity for all. I will talk a little bit more about the Export-Import Bank, because having a fully functioning bank is incredibly important. And these are very, very important issues to our state. It's not surprising that we have 2 members of the Washington State delegation here, because we are the most trade-dependent state in the country. And my district is one of the most trade-dependent states or districts in the country. So these are very, very important issues, and we need to continue to have a focus here. I just want to thank you again for your work. And look forward to the conversation to talk a little bit more about the Export-Import Bank a little bit later. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. The PEC is always grateful for the local representatives that we have, that we can glean information from our leaders in the cities. So here now, I'd like Bob Buckhorn to speak a little.
Madam Chairman, thank you on behalf of America's mayors and the U.S. Conference of Mayors. We want to thank you for including us in this group. Mayors are the tip of the spear. For us, the only easy day was yesterday. And it's not just about potholes and getting cats out of trees. It's about expanding and projecting our global presence. And for us, certainly as the mayor of Tampa, I'm not competing or trading with Alabama. I'm competing and trading with global entities and global regions around the world, and it's important to us that those barriers be knocked down and those tariffs be removed so made in American goods can be projected elsewhere. 86% of U.S. exports are generated in our nation's cities and their metro regions. So we know, as our testimony before the International Trade Commission in support of TPP indicated, that exports means jobs on Main Street. We have been privileged to work with Ambassador Froman, spreading that message all over America. The one thing about mayors is that when they're in the foxhole with you, they're not going anywhere. And we will be there till, as they say down south, until the last dog dies. So moving forward, Madam Chairman, we stand ready to be of whatever assistance is necessary, recognizing that trade can be disruptive, and there are disruptive technologies that force industries to reinvent themselves. And as part of that process, there is some degree of uncomfortableness. And we also recognize that increasing training opportunities and allowing workers to retool is important. And so as we move forward, as we continue to advocate on behalf of breaking down barriers, we need to also recognize that that has a very real impact at the local level, not because of the trade agreement, but because technologies have changed the way we do business. I would point to the city of Pittsburgh that just last week announced that they are going to be the target for an entire fleet of driverless cars coordinated by Uber. That is a disruptive technology that has changed the transportation industry, and we as a country have to be prepared to deal with that and have to be prepared to help workers retrain and prepare for that next iteration. The U.S. Conference of Mayors stands with you. We will be with whoever the next administration is moving forward, advocating on behalf of less barriers and more opportunities for U.S. workers to export made in USA. We want to thank all of you for the effort that you have endeavored, Secretary Fox for his leadership. It's always nice to see a former mayor at the table, and mayors appreciate that. Secretary Pritzker, for your advocacy on behalf of National Export Initiative. Obviously, Ambassador Froman, who we have spent a great deal of time with and will continue to do so. And certainly Mrs. Jarrett, who has always been a friend of mayors and a friend of cities, and certainly this president, who we could not have asked for a better friend as the urban areas continue to take their rightful place. So, Madam Chairman, on behalf of America's mayors, we thank you. We are with you. We're not going anywhere. And we look forward to what the future brings for all of us and for American trade.
We are counting on you not going anywhere. You and
No,
all of the
ma'am.
mayors. And Mayor Buckhorn, has been great to work with you and to all of the mayor reps at the President's Export Council. Keep getting cats out of trees and staying
Potholes.
with the, and potholes. Thank you. Now I'd like to turn to our, timing is perfect here. I will recognize Senator Klobuchar. Welcome. Thank you. I'm going to put you on the spot immediately and ask you to make a few remarks, please.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much. And it is wonderful to be here, and I want to thank you for the great work you're doing. I'd say the number one thing that we are concerned about right now from the export-import side is just that we still don't have the commissioner approved. And while we're glad we got it, the bank reauthorized, that continues to be a major issue on the Hill, and we're continuing to push. As you know, it's a Republican appointee, and we haven't been able to get that done. And there's a lot of discussions about trying to get that done because it puts such a limit on what the bank can do. So that's one thing. I know the administration is working valiantly on the trade agreement, and so there's a lot of discussion about that. And then I'm personally working a lot on trying to get the Cuba authorization so that we can try to lift the embargo, and that's my bill. And we get more and more supporters all the time on that, and that would be a wonderful accomplishment to get that done. So thank you very much for having me, and it's been an honor to be part of this group.
Thank you. Thank you for coming and for speaking. I'd like to turn now to our letters of recommendation. As you know, we have two that we're making to the president today. Our first letter emphasizes the two remaining priorities of this administration. We've talked a lot about them already. These are, in my view, two of the more important and significant pieces of work that the United States government has remaining in this administration. First is to work with Congress to implement the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP. As someone who has worked with the Japanese for over a decade, I cannot help but be amazed that we are on the cusp of a comprehensive free trade agreement with Japan. And as an American who remembers well our domestic turmoils during the Vietnam War, it's kind of remarkable to think that we would be on the cusp of entering into a free trade agreement with the Vietnamese government. When you stop to consider the entire fabric of trading relationships that would be built among our 12 nations that are a party of TPP, the historic scope and scale of this agreement truly becomes apparent. It is a remarkable achievement, and we simply cannot allow it to slip through our fingers in these last couple of months. The second recommendation is in our first letter is to work with the Senate leadership to secure confirmation of the pending nominees to the Board of Directors of the Export-Import Bank of the United States, what you were just speaking about. This council long supported this effort to reauthorize the bank's charter, but as we know, without a voting quorum on the bank's board, the approval process is languishing. There were recently more than 30 transactions held up because the board does not have a voting quorum. And those transactions are reportedly worth over $20 billion, which translates into lost opportunities to support good-paying jobs in the United States. We need XM to ensure a level playing field for American business, and XM needs a quorum in order to provide effective support for U.S. export competitiveness. Now I'll stop here on those 2 points and turn to my colleagues for their remarks regarding this letter in the following order. First, Dave Abney, then I'll move to Ginny, then I'll move to Andrew, if he's still there. Where is Andrew? Ah, there you are. You always sit on that side of the table, I should know that by now. And then fourth to Marilyn Houston from Lockheed. David, will you begin, please?
Good morning, and thank you, Ursula, for your leadership on this council and for giving me the chance to comment on this first letter. We believe the single most important step that the U.S. government can take to continue the momentum of the economy and to enhance exports is to pass the Trans-Pacific Partnership this year. We've reached a critical moment in terms of ensuring that we don't miss out on the substantial benefits of this agreement and what it would bring to U.S. businesses trading with the other 11 countries. This administration successfully passed bilateral trade agreements with Colombia, Panama, and South Korea. And while those agreements benefited our customers, the TPP is a whole different level in terms of the opportunities that it will bring to our nation's economy. We at UPS, we go where our customers want to go, and the Asia-Pacific region is drawing a lot of focus. Trading globally is a complicated process. There are barriers, there's confusing rules, redundant paperwork, and high cost. And it's small businesses that really pay the price of these obstacles. So we work with our customers, many of these small customers, every day. We see that they want to sell their products overseas, but may not have the resources or the intellectual knowledge of how to do that. And while we can guide them at UPS, the TPP agreement reduces those obstacles and gives them more incentive to go global thanks to these new market opportunities that it provides. Small businesses are the faces of global trade. But unless we ratify and implement the TPP, all of this economic opportunity could be lost. So we're pleased to say that we're doing all that we can in support of the administration's big push for advancing TPP. But we have to realize that most of the other TPP countries are set to try to get this thing approved this year. We can't be left out. We have to be right there with them. And again, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir. But TPP represents an important symbol of American commitment and leadership in Asia-Pacific area, promoting geopolitical stability and offering positive direction for international relations. This truly is a historic opportunity. And we encourage the administration's cooperation with Congress to ensure passage before the end of your tenure. And really want to thank you for the chance to make those comments.
Thank you very much, David. I agree with your points. 11 other guys. We have to be there with them.
That's right.
Ginny from IBM.
So we have first spoke about the importance of TPP. Let me just start one more time, though, by thanking really Ambassador Froman, Secretary Pritzker, the entire staff and team, administrative team of the President. And the President himself has really put his shoulder into this. And I think why that is so important is when this passes, and we're gonna work right with you there, one of the biggest legacies this will leave is that this modernizes trade for the digital age. And I don't think I'm underestimating that by saying that. It modernizes trade for the digital age. And so I remember last year I made a few comments, and there was something called the Digital Dozen that Ambassador Froman worked on. That's now the Digital 2 Dozen. But I think it's important that everyone knows it matters to every single company. It does not just matter to a tech company. And when I go through some of the very simple points, if I say them, I think it'll resonate with any firm, that you should be able to move your data across any border. That's included as part of this. That you should not have to store data locally. You should be able to store it where you have to store it for your business. That it should protect your source code, anything that you write. Everyone's a tech company these days. that as well, that it should bar that you have to be forced to transfer any of your intellectual property. These are just some of the points that are in this trade agreement. And to me, TPP therefore recognizes that the digital aspects of trade are the lifeblood of commerce for any company. And so I think it's vital. It doesn't matter your company or your sector. So we, like many, and I think I speak for almost the whole business community, are strong supporters because this does what we need it to do. And I think that's the important point. And I would just add, Penny, you mentioned don't believe everything you read. I'm quite familiar with that sort of issue. And Ambassador Froman, I think yesterday you said something about, if I have your quote right, it's impossible until it's inevitable. And so therefore we are going to push strongly with Congress for ratification this year, and we're not giving up. So it's that important to all of us.
Well said and well done. Impossible until it's inevitable. Like that. It's another one I'll keep. Andrew Liveris from Dow Chemical.
Thank you, Ursula. As one of the rookie class of the PEC, the 7 years or so I was drafted early, I want to particularly thank the Team USA in front of me here, Valerie, Penny, Jeff, Ambassador Froman, I'll call you Mike, and Ursula, your leadership, and Jim McNerney before you. It's been a pleasure to serve with you, and it's been a pleasure to see the United States rise in exports because of this council. And I think this council has quarterbacked an incredible number of initiatives that matter. And in this letter, we talk about TPP and EXIM, but I want to come back to just one aspect of this that matters to my sector, my industry. We have over $50 billion of assets in the United States. We employ 25,000 people directly, 150,000 indirectly, 22,000 small businesses rely on our ecosystem, and 1 in 5 of those jobs depends on exports. And that commentary and the ability of the United States to grow means Team USA has to play as Team USA everywhere, and the TPP does that. I just flew back from Buenos Aires. I was with Team Argentina yesterday. Team Argentina under President Macri wants to work with Team USA. They want to find a way into TPP. They want to find, they're not even in the Pacific, as last time I checked geographically. But they're trying to find a way through the Andean Pact, obviously with Mercosur. Markets are wanting to be part of our ecosystem. And the job growth that Jeff talked about earlier is happening because we have that drive. President Obama, by really picking up exports as one of his sine qua non issues, and I authored Make It in America as an Australian member of this council, I want you to note that Team USA is a winner because of 2 issues, and not the obvious one under TPP. Issue number 1 is tariffs, obviously. In my sector alone, TPP, with those trading partners, will remove 97% of the tariff barriers. But as Ambassador Froman knows, this is not just about that. This is about regulatory standards. This is the highest standard possible being exercised with our trading partners so all of humanity can benefit. It's a big goal. It's every country in the world there wants to cooperate on regulatory standards to enable trade, the non-tariff tariff barriers. We have to enable TPP through this letter as it recommends so we can do whatever all my colleagues have said. But beyond that, the regulatory cooperation councils that it sets up have to function, have to work, which is why the ongoing work of the mayors, the ongoing work of all of the representatives matters here. We've got the big hurdle to get in front of us. We've got to get it approved. But that just starts the ability for Team USA to keep winning. And I thank you again for your leadership.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Marilyn Houston from Lockheed Martin.
Thank you. Is my microphone on? Yes. Thank you, Ursula, and thank you for your leadership at the council. And it's been a privilege to serve on this council with you and the rest of our colleagues here. I want to take a few moments and talk about trade and what it means for more than our economic security. I think it's very important to the economic interest of the U.S. We've heard a lot about that today. It's outlined very well in our letters. But it's also very important to our national security. Most Americans certainly understand that if you increase trade, that you increase U.S. exports, it's good for jobs, it's good for the industrial base, it's good for our ability to get advanced manufacturing and technology and all of those things that are developed in our country. But it's also particularly critical, even for the U.S. aerospace and defense industry in that regard. But one of the most important things that we are responsible for is providing that capability to our U.S. armed forces and helping to address the threats around the world with superior capabilities and with superior systems. And so right now we are facing unprecedented global threats that require that we make sure that we have safety for our citizens in the U.S. and that we have the strongest national security. To do that, we need our partners and allies around the world. We need the relationships. We need to ensure that they not only have the will, but they have the wherewithal to support us in that focus on the threats that we face. The U.S. aerospace and defense industry is the leading exporter. We had a record trade balance in 2015. We generated $142 billion of exports that accounted for 9% of all U.S. exports of domestic goods. The Asia-Pacific region accounted for 37% of total U.S. aerospace and defense exports in 2015, and those exports to the region have grown by 77% since 2010. But it's becoming increasingly competitive. We're finding our foreign competition is growing, and that's our share is stagnant. Even though we've seen growth in exports, our share in those exports is stagnant because of foreign competition that is making inroads there. They are growing too. Increasingly then, U.S. exports and competitiveness abroad is not only good for our economic security, it's good for our national security, and we must grow trade. We cannot trade unless we have trading partners with open markets who trust us. So it's most important that in order for us to achieve our global national security objectives that I mentioned, is that we have the support of our international partners and our allies, because that stronger trade with them reinforces those relationships and those partnerships that when we need to go together to address a conflict, we have their trust and confidence in doing that. So accordingly, the U.S. aerospace and defense exporters are certainly committed to supporting U.S. trade policies. We're supportive of the trade policies that this council has been working so hard to bring across, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to comment on that and to reiterate that it's not just about our economic interest in the United States, it's also about our national security interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marilyn. I'll turn now to members of the administration, beginning with Ambassador Froman, Trade Rep.
Well, thank you very much, Ursula, and thank you for chairing this. Thanks you to the whole council. You've been really an invaluable source of support and guidance, and I think Jeff is absolutely right. This has been a best practice in terms of public-private partnership, and we really appreciate that. Since we met in December, we went to Nairobi, completed an agreement on agricultural subsidies, on least developed countries. We opened up the WTO to new issues like e-commerce and SMEs. ITA, the Information Technology Agreement, has come into force. The Trade Facilitation Agreement now has 92 countries that have ratified it, so we're about 85% of the way there for that to be fully implemented. And just yesterday, the President announced our 23rd enforcement action at the WTO, our 14th vis-a-vis China, having to do with agricultural subsidies. So it's been an active period. And looking ahead, of course, we're continuing to work on TTIP, on TISA, on the Environmental Goods Agreement. As the President has directed all of us, we're going to run through the tape all the way to the end. So we have some significant work to do. Number one priority, of course, is getting TPP through Congress. And again, since our meeting in December, the case for TPP has just gotten stronger. The Peterson Institute, the ITC have come out with their reports, $350 billion in increased exports, $130 billion of increased GDP, and very importantly, 2/3 of the benefits of TPP go to workers. And it's about evenly split between skilled workers and unskilled workers. And that's really important that we get that message out there. We know that from recent surveys that the American public is actually more pro-trade and more pro-TPP than the headlines would have you note. Actually, a majority of Republicans, Democrats, and independents in favor of trade and TPP, but we need to do a better job of getting the case out there. We've been working very closely with virtually the entire business community to move this forward. We're extremely grateful for our partnership with America's mayors and America's governors, and you can tell from our partnership with Mayor Buckhorn just how enthusiastic they are. I would just underscore, the four previous speakers really laid out all the benefits of TPP. The costs of delay, the economic costs are significant. It's been estimated about $700 per American family. It's taxing the American family $700 for just a one-year delay in implementing TPP. And the other costs, in terms of whether it's the digital economy rules that Ginny referred to, or our intellectual property rights protections, or putting disciplines on state-owned enterprises, or making sure that countries live up to science-based agricultural regulations. Those are all things that will happen if TPP goes into place, and if not, they won't. Because the other countries aren't standing still. They're moving ahead with their own agreements. They don't have those provisions in them. And if they move ahead and we don't, we'll find ourselves actually squeezed out of these markets and living with a trading regime that reflects a set of rules that don't reflect our interests or our values. So there is urgency there. We appreciate everything this council has done and the broader communities that it represents, and we're confident working with members of Congress that we can work through the outstanding issues and get this done this year. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mike. You've been a stalwart, the whole administration has, but you've been the tip of the spear. So thank you for all of the work that you've put in, and just your brain power and your energy has really helped us as business leaders. Do any of the other elected officials want to speak? Please, if anyone wants to, please raise your hand. Please, Susan.
Thank you. I wanted to quickly say thank you to Secretary Pritzker for bringing up the ICANN transition and the importance of a multi-stakeholder model for free and open internet. So thank you for mentioning that earlier. A few years ago, I did a global exporter forum in my district with Congressman Reichert and Export-Import Bank Chairman Fred Hochberg. And it was standing room only, many small businesses as well. We have many businesses in Washington State that use the services of the Export-Import Bank, and that number is growing. And one business in my district which uses XM told me 75% of their growth was through international exports, and that the XM Bank levels the playing field for U.S. companies like his by creating predictability and mitigating market risk. So this is an incredibly important issue, and I think folks understand this isn't a partisan issue. It's being held up by a few very loud voices and powerful positions. And we know that the expiration hurt hundreds of small and middle market businesses in our state alone, and how critical it was that we reauthorized the Export-Import Bank. But it's not fully functional right now. It's hamstrung because of efforts that prevent it from being able to make decisions, especially on providing larger loans. And so it's incredibly important that the Senate is finally able to either confirm a nominee so that we have a quorum, or that an upcoming continuing resolution potentially includes changes that would allow the current membership to constitute a quorum. So I encourage everyone to continue to keep this issue top of mind, because we definitely need a fully functional export-import bank. So thank you very much.
Madam Chair, there's just one thing I wanted to add, and thank you, that was well said, because I kind of came in abruptly, and I wanted to thank the White House for their incredible work, and especially Secretary Pritzker and Mr. Zients and Ambassador Froman on the steel issue. And I'm not everyone has business in this area, but we've had thousands of workers laid off in northern Minnesota, and now a number of them are coming back because of the administration's aggressive enforcement of some of the steel dumping and adding the tariffs and doing some things that were actually necessary and legal, and it made such a big difference, and we are hopeful as we go forward. But it was such a team effort, and I wanted to thank you on behalf of all the workers in northern Minnesota.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman, and thank you, Amy Klobuchar. Oh, please, go ahead, Dave.
I feel compelled to at least comment as the chairman of the Trade Committee and working closely with the ambassador. Some might be interested in what's going on in Congress regarding TPP. And although we've all shared the positive news about what we can do, the news that we can deliver, there are some political realities here that we all know are creating this uphill battle for us. And we've been meeting tomorrow, I think, right, Ambassador? Bipartisan meeting tomorrow. Both sides will have an opportunity to share with the ambassador once again what some of the concerns are. The reality is we lost some votes with some of the issues, tobacco being one of those. Those people who voted for TPA are no longer on board with TPP. And there are some others that have fallen off. On the D side, we had 28 votes for TPA. We have 28 still on TPP. They estimate an additional 12 Democrat votes coming forward, but that's not enough. So both parties, both sides, and I know we try to stay non-political in this room, but the reality is there's a lot of political work to do up on the Hill to not only educate members, but to help, and we're working on this, but to help them overcome the issues that they are experiencing and getting feedback from in their own districts. The tobacco issue may be one that we can't resolve, but we are making progress on financial services. We're making great progress on I think on biologics too. We're starting to come to a place where we might find a pathway forward. But I just wanted to really point out the difficulties here, and then just one other comment, if I may, on businesses. We had a meeting with the business community yesterday, the Chairman Brady and I. You're on board, and you get it, and you get not only the economic benefit to your communities, but you also get the geopolitical connection, and the benefit to people who are working in these trade jobs are obvious. But one of the hurdles that we have to overcome, and on the D side especially, one of the hurdles that needs to be overcome are unions who are so opposed to trade agreements that, at least in my opinion, I've met with very few that are on board. And I would ask if this council has any influence on any of those unions to use that to educate those folks on the benefits to their jobs, especially longshoremen, who obviously have a huge role to play in our trade economy. So I just wanted to point those things out. And again, I just really appreciate your leadership, Ursula, and all the hard work of all the members of the PEC. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, an uphill battle.
Yeah, but we can get it
Long one,
done.
too. I
Yep.
agree, I agree. We will not take our shoulders away from the grindstone.
Thank you.
And now I'd like to recognize Lee Zach from US TDA. Where's Lee? There you go.
Thank you very much, Ursula. Thank you very much for your leadership, and I want to thank the members of the PAC for their support. Andrew, I especially want to thank you for your reference to Team USA, because the administration has really focused on having the agencies work together as Team USA. And I have to say, as the agency that's responsible for project planning for infrastructure projects around the world, we clearly have seen the results of us working together. And we've moved from, for every dollar we program, from $1 to $35 in exports to $1 to 74. But we can only do that if we're at full strength. And without Exim Bank being at full strength, the team is not at full strength. And I just returned from India with Chairman Hochberg, where we were talking about smart cities and other things as well. And we kept hearing the chorus from businesses indicating that they can't take advantage of the opportunities that we're creating without Exim Bank being at full strength. So we clearly support Exim Bank having a full board in the future. And I also want to thank Secretary Pritzker for her support of our global procurement initiative. Within the last month and a half, the World Bank has become a partner with us, focusing on best value, as well as India and Mexico. And I very much thank you all for your support in the letter to the President supporting our global procurement initiative. And again, full support for Exim Bank. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ambassador Froman, anything else? Nothing? Thank you. I'd like to now call on the Vice Chair and the first Vice President of the Export-Import Bank, Wanda Felton. You've been talked about a lot.
Sorry?
Your agency has been spoken about a lot.
Thank you all. We very much appreciate it. Thank you, Ursula.
Thank you, Ursula, for your comments, and Lee Zach, especially for yours. On behalf of everyone at Exim Bank, and especially Chairman Hochberg, who could not be here today, I want to thank you all for your leadership of the President's Export Council. I especially want to thank President Obama for leading all of us on a successful path of collaboration toward job creation and economic growth through exports. And I'd like to thank every member of the Council, with special thanks to Chair Burns, Vice Chair Sorensen, Secretary Pritzker, Valerie Jarrett, Jeff Zients, Senators Crapo, Cornyn, Gillibrand, and Klobuchar, Representatives Del Benet, Kelly, Kilday, Reichert, and T. Berry. Thank you all. Time again, this council and my colleagues from across the administration have trumpeted the importance of Ex-Im Bank and the critical tools it offers American exporters. Over the years, the PEC has made a forceful case for the reauthorization of the bank, called for swift confirmation of members of its board and directors, made helpful recommendations to improve Ex-Im Bank's programs for American exporters, especially the small and medium-sized enterprises we serve. These recommendations and calls to action have made a difference, and today's TPP and Ex-Im letter is no different. As today's letter notes, Ex-Im continues to function on a limited basis due to the absence of a voting quorum of its board of directors. Without a quorum, Ex-Im is unable to finance medium and long-term transactions above $10 million. Yet the demand is there, it's piling up. Ex-Im now has more than 30 board-level transactions pending in the pipeline, valued at more than $20 billion. These are not just applications on paper. These transactions represent tens of thousands of American jobs. They represent potential exports in a variety of highly competitive industries, including energy, satellites, and transportation. And these transactions have national supply chain impacts affecting manufacturing and service jobs in every corner of the country. Without an Ex-Im Bank quorum, these opportunities could be lost and jobs sent overseas. And this is not just a problem for large exporters and their supply chains. Since 2009, more than 40% of the companies that have directly benefited from Ex-Im Bank board-approved financing have been small businesses. So while this is our last meeting, our work must continue. Our nation's exporters and workers cannot afford for us to stop here. American jobs depend on your continued leadership. The Council's support and recommendations have strengthened the service of the U.S. government that the U.S. government offers to American exporters and their employees. I hope we can continue to count on your support now and well into the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Finally, I'd like to recognize the Assistant Secretary of State for Economic and Business Affairs, Charles Rifkin.
Well, thank you very much, Ursula. And I just wanted to share less than 2 minutes of thoughts on TPP. We support the Ex-Im letter as well. But on behalf of Secretary Kerry, I want to start by saying thank you personally and thank the Council for all the hard work supporting trade that you've done over the past 6 years. And in the recommendation letter for TPP, it talks about making enactment of the TPP the administration's highest priority. And I just wanted to say that we cannot agree with you more on this point. We're proud to join our interagency partners and Ambassador Froman and Secretary Pritzker and their teams in our concerted effort to get this over the finish line this year. Now, I've made the case for trade in my travels around the world, and to the point about unions that was made a bit ago, I've traveled also to Detroit, Chicago, Los Angeles, Miami, Atlanta, and I was in Austin until late last night as well. And at every opportunity, I underscore the fact that globalization, as Secretary Kerry put it, is a genie that's already come out of the bottle. Ignoring globalization is not going to make it go away any more than closing the doors of a house are going to stop a rising tide. And from the State Department's perspective, we cannot let America drop out of this race. We cannot stand in the way of our companies expanding their business to the 95% of the global market that lies beyond our borders. And we certainly can't let countries like China write the rules of the road according to their standards and their values. The strategic case for trade, as Marilyn mentioned, is compelling, and the magnetic impact of this deal is palpable. I've spoken to countries in the East Asia Pacific who are lining up with the hopes of joining this historic pact, and as Andrew mentioned, it's happening in the Western Hemisphere as well. Specifically, you mentioned Argentina. And that's why supporting TPP is the smartest and most forward-thinking thing we can do to build our own economic security through the jobs we bring, the barriers we break down, the standards we raise, and the economic and strategic strength that we build in the region. And with that, I just want to thank the PEC again for its unflagging support of the U.S. trade policy to advance the liberalization and the expansions of our trading relationships around the world.
Thank you very much. Assistant Secretary Rifkin, very well said. When we first started coming to this PEC, the Secretary of State would come occasionally to speak with us, and it made it clear to me and I think to all of us how interrelated these two agencies are, but this whole trade agenda is for the United States, for not only security, but for peace, for prosperity, and job growth. So thank you for keeping that drumbeat going and reminding us of it. Now I'd like to ask anyone else who seeks recognition to please raise their hand. We can actually add you into the conversation as well. Now move to adopt this priority, oh, sorry, we have one? No, we'll wait. I'm going to get to you later, don't worry. I now move to adopt this letter of priority recommendations to the president. Is there a second? Second. Are there any objections to this priority recommendation letter? Hearing none, I propose a vote to adopt this letter. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Wonderful. Any nays? The council's letter is adopted unanimously. I want to move on to the discussion of PEC letter number 2. Our second letter summarizes some of the important achievements that resulted from recommendations offered by the council's subcommittees over the last 6 years. This letter also identifies some forward-looking priorities for promoting export-led economic growth in the United States. I'll turn to Andrew Liveris from Dow to lead the discussion on global competitiveness. Andrew?
Thank you, Ursula. I was chair of the Global Competitiveness Subcommittee, honored that we have so many things we have to recognize, and for the good of the order and the fact that this is the last meeting, I think we should say them all. The 3 FTAs, I think we've forgotten maybe that this was the beginning, Ambassador Froman, Colombia, South Korea, Panama. I mean, that was an incredible start to a very pro-trade agenda for not just the PEC, but of course the administration and Congress. Securing Trade Promotion Authority was incredible work, putting it all together so that we could all see the benefit of allowing the government to embark on new agreements, set the platform. Reinvigorating the WTO to allow plurilateral agreements. This is not to be ignored either. The WTO is the foundational body for enabling all post-Doha, if you remember that term, post-Doha agreements. So the WTO played a very big role. But information technology agreements, as Ginny's already said and others have commented on, and trade agreements in services, these are big agenda items still in front of us. The digitization of the world that Ginny referred to, all the things that come with the positive of the internet, as already referred to by Secretary Pritzker, but also the negative, and what we have to do to protect standards and keep them in the control of governments that really speak to the highest standards humanity needs. This was a very big beginning. Securing a trade facilitation agreement, we hope we enters into force soon. That's a very key one. It serves as a blueprint in terms of modernizing and streamlining customs and border control efficiencies, very important. And then, of course, the significant breaking of ground. I never thought I'd see it in my career lifetime that we would begin negotiations with the European Union. Given that the European Union is in its various states of functionality, if I can say it in the most positive way, it's very important that we keep taking the leadership there and that this administration started something that needs to be continued. It's ambitious, it's meaningful, it's practical, and there are people in the EU who want this done, and I think we've got to remember that, notwithstanding the Brexit situation. So the Global Competitive Subcommittee just wanted to report out, Ursula, Madam Chairwoman, that much has been done, much is yet to do, and global competitiveness, as the subcommittee speaks to, is the agenda, as mentioned by many. We are competing in a world of nations that are seeking job creation in their economies, and we have to be facilitators to that, not obstructionists. That's all I have to say on that committee, and I think you have to turn it over to, I think, yourself.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for all of the work of the committee members on global competitiveness. Next, our letter highlights the work of the Manufacturing Services and Agriculture Subcommittee. The second acknowledges the administration's success in significantly reducing visa wait times, as well as the administration's focus in leading negotiations to expand product coverage under the Information Technology Agreement to a successful conclusion. They are each significant achievements. Next, we have a section from the SME Business Engagement Subcommittee. I'll turn to Jean Hale from GNC Equipment Corporation to lead, and then I'll turn to Vanessa Kaiches from Columbia Green, who also wants to comment. So, Jean first.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairwoman Burns, and to all my PEC members. It has truly been an honor to serve the president with each of you. I was humbled to help lead the way, along with all the SME subcommittee members, CEOs, and my representative, Tracy Hernandez now. She's recently married, so to shed light on the most important and pressing needs of small and disadvantaged businesses in America. First we listened, then we acted. We are grateful for the earnest attention that Commerce, SBA, trade reps, and Ex-Im Bank president gave to fulfilling our recommendations. Bringing the National Export Initiative to the regional and local levels where small businesses survives and thrives was key. We commend the Commerce Department for its efforts in making that a priority, and today, more than 24 major municipalities now boast integrated export and inbound investment plans for maximizing their participation in global commerce. The SBA took it to the streets. We applaud their investing in and training of local expertise at all 68 districts, small business development centers, and also expanding their loan programs to regional and community banks. Until every small and minority company is flourishing and accessing the world's customers, we won't stop working to break down barriers, but we stand tall, knowing that these last 6 years of PEC work is making a difference in thousands of businesses and their employees. Thank you for the opportunity to serve. Now I'd like to ask Vanessa to comment, if she'd like to.
Thank you, Jamie. I'd just like to elaborate a little bit more on some of the things that we were able to accomplish because small business is such an important issue in the heart of America, and we were able to get quite a few things done. And joining this council as an entrepreneur 3 years ago, honestly, I wasn't really sure what we would get done, but I was pleasantly surprised of the things that we were, and particularly I have to comment on the SBA and Maria. One of the big issues we said was it was impossible for small businesses to get access to your loans. It was too much paperwork and a lot of no streamlining, and you came out with SBA 1 to make it easier for small business across this country to get loans, so thank you. And we moved from the federal government to the states. It was awesome having the Governors Association here. They also came up with creative financing ideas. Banks are still not loaning to small businesses and entrepreneurs. So states came up with creative financing throughout the country, and I urge the Governors Association to keep having states do that. It really does allow access to capital to small business. And once we get access to capital through those two types of agencies, it then really moves to the mayors. Exporting, as a small business and entrepreneur, it's really hard to get to the federal government to learn how to export, but it isn't hard to export. And so if we have access to the mayors and it's transparent and it's open and you hold trade missions and you give us access to how to export, we can definitely see the increase in exports. And finally, I just want to thank President Obama and Secretary Pritzker for having small business on this Export Council. I think it made a huge difference and a voice. And many of the CEOs, from Jim McNeary when he was chair, or from Ursula when you're chairwoman, you have always allowed us to have a voice for this sector, which I think is really, really important. And we couldn't have done it with many of the CEOs in this room. You also were creative in figuring out how to pay your supply chain faster, or putting venture money in your small businesses, or partnering. In fact, here I want to thank Andrew and Dow and your entire team who helped us put forward all of these initiatives, because as a small company, we just couldn't do it. So here we have these big companies coming in and helping us push these initiatives forward. So with that, in closing, I hope as we all move forward, I think we can see in the election there's this back and forth between big company and Wall Street and small business and entrepreneur. And we know job growth comes from small business. So I urge us all to continue to take a look at how we grow entrepreneurism, innovation, and job growth, because that is the heart of America. And thank you again for letting me serve on this council. It was a true honor working with all of you. Thank you.
Vanessa, you continue to impress. So thank you very much, and thank you, Jean, for your comments. I'm going to ask all forward speakers to make their remarks brief, because I think we're going to get kicked out of this room at some point. The next section is from our Trade Promotion and Advocacy Subcommittee. I'll turn it to David for his brief remarks here, and then to Andres if he has something to say as well. Thank you.
Okay. So as chair of the Trade Promotion and Advocacy Subcommittee, I want to highlight just a couple of matters that are critical to increasing U.S. exports. First is the World Trade Organization's Trade Facilitation Agreement. TFA is the first new multilateral trade agreement in the WTO's history. And they gained, excuse me just a minute. and a game changer for customs standards worldwide. It has the potential to increase global merchandise exports by up to $1 trillion. We'll try it one more time. Here we go. We applaud the administration for its leadership in successfully concluding negotiations. As of today, 92 of 110 countries have ratified the TFA for agreement to enter into force. TFA raises the standards on global customs capabilities that impacts every business in this room that depends on timely and cost-effective shipments. One of the key provisions is the single window, the establishment of the single window, which allows shippers to submit documents through a single entry point. This one government at the border fits in with the administration's goals to facilitate the trading process for U.S. companies, especially encouraging for small businesses. And again, the members of this committee are thankful for the advances made during this administration's tenure. And thank you.
Mr. Andrews?
Okay, thank you, Chair Burns, and thank you, Secretary Pritzker, for your leadership. I just want to make a comment on our letter for domestic infrastructure renewal, to remind that the importance of infrastructure for our competitiveness, for improving exports, but it also will create millions of jobs, and it's a way of demonstrating and really sharing the benefits of trade with the general public. Because better infrastructure is not only good for business, but it's also good for everybody's quality of life. So that's the comment I wanted to make.
Thank you very much. The next section is on workforce readiness and work from that subcommittee. I'm particularly proud of this subcommittee's work in drawing attention to the challenges posed by the shortage of STEM students and STEM graduates in the United States. I believe that Labor Secretary, Deputy Secretary Liu would like to provide a quick comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are proud to support the recommendations of the Workforce Readiness Subcommittee, and as you indicated, there are challenges that all businesses face in finding skilled workers. We are especially proud of the support the subcommittee is giving to expanding apprenticeships, which has been really one of our highest priorities over the past 2.5 years. So we appreciate the subcommittee's recognition of that, and we remain fully committed to that initiative.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary Liu. The final section of our letter is from the Subcommittee on Export Administration. PEXA is grateful for the administration's successful interagency collaboration in driving this reform agenda. My colleague Raul Pendraza would normally talk about this, but he's not here today. Building on that success, PEXA calls for the creation of an interagency advisory committee sponsored by the Commerce and State Departments to institutionalize this joint approach to regulatory reviews that allows for improved engagement with industry. I believe that Marilyn Houston from Lockheed Martin has some quick comments on that.
I do. I'd first like to reiterate applauding the administration for recognizing up front the onerous and outdated system that we had for export control and have put in some very significant reforms. We've restructured in a large way the technology control list, and I think that's going to help us to be the preferred supplier around the world with a lot of our customers. So we thank you for that, but we're not done yet. We still need to do more in terms of transparency, predictability, and efficiency for approving defense trade with our closest allies and partners. So moving forward, what we would ask that we continue to return to the basic principles of making sure that we're focusing on those things that matter the most, those controls that matter the most, that we are removing any incentive for our foreign competition to design out U.S. components and based on the control requirements, and that we facilitate and continue to streamline our international security cooperation process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marilyn. Before we go to a vote, I'll note that our letter also expresses the collective gratitude of the private sector members of the PEC to President Obama for the privilege of serving on this Export Council. It has been informative, educational, and fun. And I think we've been able to form a bond that should help business at least, and I hope government as well move forward in a more expeditious way. I believe that Ken Frazier from Merck, I told you I'd get back to you, Ken, would like to comment as well.
Thank you, Ursula. So I'd like to join all of my private industry colleagues in thanking the President as well as his terrific teams, starting with Secretary Pritzker, Ambassador Froman, Senior Advisor Jarrett. Mr. Zients has always been a very warm person in welcoming us to the White House, as well as others. I think this has been a tremendous opportunity for us to work effectively with the administration and to show an opportunity for this public-private partnership that's often talked about, has enormous rhetorical appeal, but often doesn't happen in the real world. So I want to thank you for that. It's been my honor to represent the innovative biopharmaceutical sector's views on this organization, recognizing that this sector directly and indirectly supports more than 4.4 million U.S. jobs and contributed $47 billion in exports last year. Our sector's exports happily have tripled between 2003 and 2015. Shows the power of doing this the right way. I also want to thank Chairman Reichert for his comments about the fact that we need to work effectively with TPP to ensure that we have a solution that works for all parties and can gain the necessary support in Congress. I will close by saying I think this administration's commitment to advancing innovation, which is a core comparative advantage of our economy as well as an export driver, and to protecting intellectual property rights has been a critical feature of our export promotion strategy. And I'd like to thank the administration for that support and for your continued leadership in the months ahead. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ken. I now move to adopt this letter to the President. Is there a second? Are there any objections to this letter as drafted? Hearing none, I propose a vote to adopt the letter. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Are there any nays? If not, the council's letter is adopted unanimously. So in closing, and we're coming up on 11 o'clock, which is perfect timing. In closing, I want to thank you all for coming. Of course, our achievements are the results of much effort by many people in this room and outside of this room. I therefore want to thank all of the business leaders, the CEOs who served on this council, as well as the members of the Obama administration, and last but certainly not least, the government staff and private sector staff who have worked so hard to make the council a success. It has been a privilege and an honor to serve with all of you. With that, this final meeting of President Obama's Export Council is adjourned.
Bravo.